Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tin Max channel. My name is Tin, and today I want to talk about something. we're gonna call it. We're gonna call this video Tin Talks. Just kidding, no, we're not. That's terrible. Uh, Basically, what I want to do here is I want to present something that I think should exist, that I want to be made, and I'm gonna list some reasons why I think it can, should, and possibly will happen. What is that thing, you ask? Well, if you read the title, you already know. Injustice versus Mortal Kombat. Now, for those of you who don't know, both Injustice and Mortal Kombat are fighting games made by the same company, NetherRealm Studios, and they're both doing pretty well right now. Injustice revolves around the DC characters, Batman, Superman, Flash, Arrow, etc. And Mortal Kombat, it's a bunch of ninjas and stuff, and monsters. Don't forget the monsters. Now, you may think, Justin, didn't they already do this? Kind of. And we'll get back to that in a second. Let me start by saying, let me just go through the reasons why I think this could work and why it should definitely happen. First of all, the most obvious reason I think this can, will, and should happen is both games are made by the same company, like I stated earlier, NetherRealm Studios, and they're also both owned by the same company, Warner Brothers. English, right? Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, that means they can just kind of do it, get permission from the higher ups, and bam, it's in production. It's happening. Another reason I think that makes it a lot easier to do is from a gameplay perspective. They're basically the same game. Now, that might seem like a bit of an simplification of it, and it kind of is to a point. Obviously, things are different between games. They have different mechanics, but they're basically the same. You could play Mortal Kombat 11 for 9 hours and then easily jump into Injustice 2, because fundamentally, the way you fight is the same. Granted, a couple buttons are different, but it's not that hard to get used to, and that just means that it's easier to, it's not one of those things where they have to take a game and another game where the gameplay doesn't really mix and then make a game out of that. The gameplay's there. They share the same DNA, so bam, already perfect. Now, another reason why I think this can and would work is because the Injustice universe is a much darker interpretation of the DC universe than your typical version of the DC universe. I mean, one of the first thing that happens in the first game is Superman puts his fist through Joker's chest. If that doesn't gel with Mortal Kombat's whole thing, what does? That being said, there's still characters in Injustice that don't kill, like Batman. But there are a lot of my point is there's darker versions of a lot of DC characters, and it would fit well with the darker storytelling of a Mortal Kombat game, is what I'm getting at. Another thing is that because these are owned by the same company and all that jazz, they've kind of already been doing this a little bit, and also a lot of it. We'll get to that. Starting with Scorpion, one of the most popular characters from the Mortal Kombat franchise, is a DLC character in the first Injustice game. 2 Mortal Kombat characters make their way into Injustice 2. Sub-Zero, one of my personal favorites, and Raiden. So, and most recently Joker in Mortal Kombat 11. And that one's significant. I'll get to that in a second. Along with Joker, they also released a whole bunch of DC-themed skins for other characters. Not the characters themselves, but hey, still a crossover. The reason I say the Joker one is a little bit more significant than the other ones is because it's easier to take the Mortal Kombat characters and stick them in Injustice, because you're taking the rating down. Bringing Joker into Mortal Kombat 11 means bringing the rating for that character up. Now, Joker's obviously a sick, twisted character with a lot of murder and blood on his hands, but you don't really see it to the degree that it happens in Mortal Kombat. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Basically, they got a DC character into a Mortal Kombat game, and it fits. He fits in with the blood and guts and the brutality of it all. Another obvious example of crossover between the two is is Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe, which was a PS3 slash Xbox 360 game released, I'm not going to look it up, a while ago. And it wasn't loved by fans, I don't think, like the hardcore fans, because they took the Mortal Kombat characters, made them PG-13. And a lot of people didn't like that. But aside from that, the game received decent reviews. And I think people look back on it a lot more fondly now. I don't know. Never played it myself. I should. It's right up my alley. But so yeah, they've done it before to, I guess you could call it middling success. And that was a more typical version of the DC universe. I think if they do it again, it should be specifically Injustice and Mortal Kombat. Injustice kind of being NetherRealm's version of the DC universe. Real quick, before I get into the crux of the issue, and what I think will be a deal breaker for a lot of people on this game, let me talk about like story elements. Honestly, the story doesn't need to be anything great. Probably wouldn't be. It's just an excuse to get these two franchises together and beat each other up. You could have evil Superman team up with, I don't know, what Mortal Kombat villain he would team up with. I don't know, freaking Quan Chi. I don't know. Just throwing names out there. You could have the return of the Dark Side and Shao Kahn merger that was in Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe. I don't remember his name. As far as like when you could set the games in the timeline of the series, I don't think it's that big a deal when you do it. I think as long as for Mortal Kombat you do it before Mortal Kombat 11, because they do the weird timeline crap. And I personally would prefer it after Injustice 2, but really it could be any time after Superman goes off the deep end and kills Joker, because that's important. Why is that important? I'm glad you asked. So, Mortal Kombat. Very famous for its fatalities, its blood and gore, its brutalities, all that fun stuff. DC, not so much. So, the big question, I think, with a game like this is, can you make it M? Can you give it a mature rating and have the blood and gore and violence of a Mortal Kombat game, but with DC characters in it? Personally, it being rated M is not a deal breaker for me. It probably is for a lot of people, but if they were like, hey, we're doing this, it's rated T, I'm okay with it. It's fine. But I know a lot of Mortal Kombat fans want the violence. That's what they come there for. I phrased that weird? That felt weird. Anyway, that being said, I think we're at a position now in time and space where DC slash Warner Brothers, I think they'd be willing to do Injustice versus Mortal Kombat and make it M. Injustice kind of already teeters on that line anyway. There's a scene in the first game where like Superman lasers Shazam in the brain and kills him. Like I mentioned earlier, hand through Joker's chest. Just, throw some more blood and have him like rip out a heart. It's basically Mortal Kombat anyway. But also outside of the Injustice universe, I think DC has been more willing to show darker versions of their characters in mainstream media. Like, it happens all the time in comics, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, think of like the scene in Batman v Superman where Superman laser beams some like soldiers just like through their bodies. Like, you see it, it's not gory or anything, but you do see it happen. And that's Superman doing that in a DC movie. Now, I know a lot of that was Snyder's influence, but it does show that they are willing to take that extra step at this point. Another good example is the movie Joker. Well, again, it's a character more prone towards violence and whatever, and it kind of fits with an R rating. It's still a DC property, or at least the mass audience, with an R rating. I don't really think you need every character to be gory and violent. I think obviously the Mortal Kombat characters would, because that's just the brand. And like, you could have a lot of DC characters do that. Like, again, the Joker could be in the game. He could get some new fatalities. Superman, like I said, this version of Superman's not above killing. A bunch of the members of the Justice League that kind of join his side are not above killing. Damian Wayne, Robin, he stored somebody through the brain. My point is, I think Warner Brothers would 100% be willing to do this, to do Mortal Kombat versus Injustice as an M-rated game. Would they is a whole nother thing. I think sales wise, it might be more of like a, well, let's keep it teen so we can get more sales, because that's definitely something that happens in movies. But like, I don't know if that really applies to video games as much. At the end of the day, that's all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for indulging me. I think this would be awesome, and I want to know what other people think. I want to open up a discussion, but more importantly, I just want to put this out in the world in hopes that it happens. NetherRealm, Warner Brothers, if you're watching this, just do it. It'd be great. I think even them having like a Mortal Kombat character in a Injustice game and vice versa, I think that's kind of planting the seed, or maybe like testing the waters on this whole thing. I mean, that's obviously pure speculation. I have none of that's based in fact, but I think that could be part of it. And I think no matter what, we'll get a version of this, whether it's a game, a comic, maybe an animated movie. I'd take an animated movie. Why not? If it's not a game, the most likely option would be a comic, and I'd still be okay with this. I just want this. I love the crossover. I love Sub-Zero in Injustice 2, and I love Joker in Mortal Kombat 11. So just make a full game of that. Right? Am I the only one? Whatever. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Tin Talks, also called Me Just Rambling, or however long this video is. Hope you enjoyed it. If you think this is a good idea, let me know down in the comments, because it is. If you don't think it's a good idea, you're wrong. Sorry. Yep, I don't know how to do outros, so thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I will see you in the next video.